we're gonna invite some amazing female leaders up here for me to pick their brain and ask them all the leadership advice, because I will tell you that when I started Career Contessa, I thought, oh, I'm just gonna give advice about all the topics I love and create events. I've had one event. I'm like, we create events over here. We're gonna create all this amazing stuff. But I forgot about the whole leading a team thing. And it's definitely been the area where I've had the most personal growth with my career. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So let's go ahead and invite our panelists up here to join me. All right, so you guys saw everyone here has a boss or is the boss, so they're ready for boss advice. So I would love for us all to start with just tell us who you are, what you do, and I want to know, what was your first leadership experience? Even if it was high school, selling orange juice, we don't care. We just want to know the first.
Okay, I'm Mallory. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Small Girls PR, which is a creative communications agency headquartered here in New York, also in LA. My first leadership experience, when I was in high school, I was really bad at sports, and I thought, what is something that I can put on my college resume that does not require athletic ability but will look really sexy? And I tried out for the business club and started doing national competitions in marketing and business where you'd get challenges, and I ended up becoming president of that club. So that was my first one.
Such a good story. Good way into your professional life. Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Schweitzer. I started my own company a year ago. It's called The Callie Co., and it's a branding and positioning firm that works with Fortune 500 companies and executives. My philosophy around branding is based on what I call the 3 R's: reach, relevance, and revenue. How do you find the biggest audience, be at the center of the conversation, and make money while you're doing it? My first leadership experience, similarly, was in high school, and that was the high school newspaper. I was also president of the a cappella club, and I think I took both extremely seriously and was probably a terrible leader to I was definitely a terrible leader because, when you have that feeling that this is the most important thing in the world and everybody should be taking it really seriously, and not everyone feels that way, and I think I thought everyone should feel that way.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Ski Tatum, founder and CEO of Landit. We are the market leader in personalized career pathing. So we're on a mission besides world domination to help each and every one of you achieve career success on your own terms. And we do that by putting you at the center and then surrounding you with all the tools that you need. Everything they have in the C-suite, we give to you. So we have companies like WeWork and others who buy our platform to invest in their talent. So my first leadership position, actually, I was in the 5th grade. I had a paper route. I was the only girl to have a paper route, so they gave me the least desirable route, which was a high-rise building. So you try delivering papers on 29 floors. So I recruited a squad to help me do that at 5 in the morning, and then it just went from there.
My name is Natalia Nastoskin. I'm the general manager of the music division at United Talent Agency, which is a global talent representation company. On the music side, I'm responsible for about 155 employees, 1,200 clients across 6 global offices. My first leadership role, I was a late bloomer compared to everybody else on this panel, was when I became an accidental CEO of another global talent agency that was ultimately acquired by UTA, where I am now. So.
Amazing. I really love when people go back to high school. I'm like, yes. All right, so I want to talk about leadership styles because I definitely think, and for all of us that have had lots of different bosses, you can tell this person's style is that person's style is this. And so, Lisa, I'd love to start with you. What is your...
First cold call.
Yeah, well, you did get people to join you at 5 a.m., so I feel like you're a good person to start this with. What's your leadership style, and how has it changed over the years?
So my leadership style has definitely changed as I became more confident and gained more experience, but I think the mistake people make is thinking there's only one style. So I like to think of it as I have 2 cups of visionary. I have a cup each of being a coach, being hopefully a democratic leader and also a pace setter, because we are a startup, and then a little bit of coercion to taste, because sometimes you just gotta put a stake in the ground. And so I think part of being a great leader is you have to be able to know your people. You have to set the vision, the true north, but you have to be able to figure out who they are so you can get the best out of them.
Anybody else want to share their leadership style?
For me, and I skew on the older side, I think, as compared to the audience and our panelists here. So,
Thank you.
Coming up in the music industry and in entertainment in general, I think that, first of all, there weren't a lot of female leaders to mentor me or to look up to. And the ones that there were, the general consensus among others coming up in the industry were like, they're a bitch. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here, but
We'll let that.
it's too late now. And I'm not that. And I thought, well, do I have to become somebody like that in order to lead? And what I've discovered, much to my pleasure, is that I don't. And I can be fair and reasonable and approachable and resourceful and be a team member, not just a team leader, but also a team member to my team. And so that's my style. I listen. That's the most important thing that I do all day long.
That's definitely a great takeaway. Just be a good listener, which is harder than it sounds, but I think that's wonderful advice. So, Callie, I want to move on to you. I want to talk about building trust with a team and building up the team organization. I know you are an entrepreneur now. You've worked for lots of companies. I mean, how do you build that trust?
I think one of the most important things is establishing a level set with your team that it doesn't matter where you work or how you work, it's just that the work gets done. I think something that I've really seen in my life as an entrepreneur is that flexibility of being able to pick my schedule and work my own hours, the idea that I might get more done between 8 and 10 than I might get done for the rest of the day. The ability to have that choice, I think, is really important. And as more and more workplaces are virtual or remote, I think that when you're either looking for a job or thinking through whether it's asking for different perks, getting a really deep understanding of how a company feels about flexibility and accommodations is really important, because if you're going to do your best work at a specific time, you want to know if your company could support that.
And Mallory, I actually want you to answer this too, because you have offices not just in New York, so you know all about having teams other places. How do you build a successful culture with the trust as the leader who's not always there?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I started the company 8.5 years ago. I was 21 years old with my co-founder, and a lot of our early just shared values between her and I have become our written out core values as we've grown across 2 offices and between 50 and 60 employees now. So things like work-life integration, everyone talks about work-life balance. I think it's really hard when you're connected all the time to social media and your phones to achieve that, but what you might be able to achieve is bringing your personal passions into your workplace if you can find a place like that. So being able to just kind of write out our core values, have them apply to both offices, and then make sure that those are reinforced from the hiring process. For those of you who raised your hand when you said, I'm not a manager yet, but I have one and I aspire to be, finding the next company out of all these great companies here or wherever it might be on your journey next, that has core values that you align with as you're in your own opposite end of the hiring process. And on our end, we also make sure those show up throughout the journey of small girls culture. So like our reviews ladder back to each of our core values. And that's how we promote people and give them raises. Are they living out our core values?
I think that's a great point in terms of beginning with the end in mind. So one thing that we do is everyone does a user manual. So when you join Landit, you don't have to waste time trying to figure out how do I like to communicate, or that one of our engineers doesn't want to be talked to between the hours of 12 and 1 because that's when he does his best work. So we literally type it up and everybody gets it. we also map to our core values. For instance, on something like PACE, if you look at our scale, we'll know that our Chief Business Development Officer is falling off. I'm next to her, and everybody else is to the middle. So you know when you get there what you're dealing with. And then we have this value. We have a no a-hole rule. We have a no drama rule. And as CEO, I always speak last, because I want to hear everybody else's voice before I chime in. So it's how are you living the values that you mentioned that actually give people the trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And if people are interviewing for a job, asking them what their values are, and if they can't answer it, that's good to know also. You might want to double think that one. Okay. So I kind of want to switch gears and I want to talk about mistakes, because we're kind of talking about how great our leadership styles are. And I know that you didn't come to a great style probably without some missteps. And I think we learn when we make mistakes. And so, Natalia, I'd love to start with you. You know, what are some missteps or mistakes maybe you made along the way and how they have helped in your leadership style today?
So one of the greatest mistakes I made was that I wanted to be all things to all people. And when you're starting out in business, and in my case as a leader, I had so many contradictory forces pulling at me, and I wanted to be everybody's friend. And so I found myself spinning in a hamster wheel, because if you're trying to please everybody, you're not moving forward. And sometimes taking unpopular decisions is what's going to propel you and your company forward, you and your people forward. And so it took me a few years to learn that, but since I've learned that, I've become a much better leader. And I always say now, you know, I'm not a $20 bill, not everybody's gonna love me. And that's really the reality, you know. When you're a leader, you have to believe in positions that you're taking, but not everybody's going to agree with you. But as long as you believe in it and you're prepared to stand behind it, you just got to roll with it. So that's probably one of the greatest leadership lessons I've learned as I've gone on.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share a misstep or a mistake? I know, it's like, tell the whole world about your mistake that you've made.
Oh no, I mean, like literally, I'm like, I've got 20 I made this week. Like, which one do I share? I think maybe the biggest mistake is perhaps not being able to recognize or admit that as much early on, and now it's just part of my practice. Where I'm like, what's a mistake that I can share with someone in this office that I've made, so they know that it's okay, and it's okay to fail, and it's okay to fail fast, as they say, but then be able to own it, be aware of it, and share the lessons that you've learned from that with the team around you. So you create that culture of just being able to move on and learn from it and see it as an opportunity to do it better next time.
I think especially as well, when we first become managers, we think that we need to have this superhuman persona in which you know absolutely everything. And so we think that showing any kind of imperfection or weakness or lack of confidence in one area equals you are not deserving of this entire job. And I think that that's something that, to Mallory's point, it's like you get more comfortable over time with the fact that you aren't supposed to know everything as the manager. Your job as the manager is to make sure that you can help everybody on the team work together and work toward a shared goal.
I think one other thing I want to add to that too is for anyone that is interviewing or will be interviewing, a lot of the time a job interviewer will ask you, like, tell me about a mistake you made, or tell me what your manager would say is your biggest weakness. And I can't tell you how many times a day, we're hiring all the time. We're hiring at Small Girls, if you're looking. I can't tell you how many times I hear this thing of like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I just try so hard. I just want things to be perfect. And every time I hear that, I'm like, your manager has never told you that you try too hard and you want everything to be perfect. Give me some real feedback that you've learned from, that you've embraced, that you were like, man, a year ago I did this and this is how I'm working on it and I'm still improving. And I think I've been able to have a lot better, more productive, honest conversations, because the truth is, like, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and you want to find a role where that weakness is okay and embraced, and they can match you based on your strengths as well, and bring that to the table and have it in mind.
I know I recently made a mistake with Career Contessa related stuff, and I sent out an email which was an apology. And I will tell you, I got so many people who responded to me saying, I respect everything more because you owned up to the mistake and apologized. Like, I do think there's something about, like, when you make a mistake, be like, I messed up and I'm sorry, and here's what I'm gonna do going forward. And then of course you can't play the sorry game forever, but it's interesting how you were saying, like, earlier in your career you might not say sorry because you feel like you have to know everything, but I think people respect the vulnerability so much. So I think that's I definitely learned from that. I'm not trying to make mistakes, but it was a warm, like, email response to that. So yeah. All right. So I wanted to talk about, so there were people in the room who were managers, and then there were people who had bosses who are probably thinking, I'm ready to potentially become a manager or become a leader. So I think the big question that comes to mind is, how do you know you're ready? Like, when do you go from being an independent contributor or an employee on a team to saying, I'm ready to be the head honcho? What's your guys' advice on that? Anybody can answer.
So we do this poll with all of our customers where we'll ask a room full of women and men, doesn't matter how senior you are, how many of you feel like you've made it? And 90% will say I haven't, even if they're CEOs. And then we'll say, how many people think you're more successful than you see yourself? And then 90% say yes. And so if you wait until you think you're ready, it's never gonna come, because so many of us suffer from imposter syndrome, right? That little voice that tells you you're not enough. So my philosophy, how I live my life and what I tell people I mentor is to win first. And by that I mean, if you approach your goals very logical, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, then you've already captured potential. But what if you just put a stake in the ground and said, I want that, and then you figure it out? And that's how you get your squad to help you do that. So I don't like people to do that calculation of, am I quite ready? Do I have what I need? Take a flying frickin' leap off the cliff, but make sure that you have people there, because you will fall down, that will help you dust off and keep going.
I love that advice, and I think some of the best advice I can offer is really the idea that you are your own best advocate, and there's no such thing as mind readers. I think so often we sit at work and we're like, why hasn't that person picked on me yet? Why haven't they asked me to do that? Why are they not thinking of me? And it's like, the reality is no one's thinking of anyone other than themselves. So you really have to take charge of your career. I mean, so often I'm like, your boss doesn't even know what you do, even if they've asked you to do those things. You have to constantly be messaging that and being really clear about what you're doing and where you want to go. And I think that that kind of advocacy is really important. And I would say that in addition to recognizing that no one is a mind reader, you have to set really clear goals and expectations with your manager so that you know when you're meeting expectations and when you're exceeding expectations, because oftentimes that's the conversation that can open things up to management, where you say, I have met all these criteria, I've taken on these additional things, and I think I'm ready for the next step.
So she and I are definitely kindred spirits, because one of the things that we get people to do at Landit is keep track of your weekly accomplishments. Because if you don't keep track, you're gonna suffer from LIFO, last in, first out. And if you're not keeping a track, I can guarantee you others aren't. And then it's also about personal brand, right? What do people say and think about you that say, I want you in the room next to me no matter what? And no one's gonna spend their hard-earned currency if they don't know the brilliance that you are providing. And no one absolutely is searching for you anywhere in any cube on any desk. So you had better be visible, and you better be comfortable touting that.
I also think that some of the folks that I've come across in my business measure their success in terms of tenure, and that is never the right measurement. So when young people come to me and they say, well, I've been here for a year and I think I'm ready. Nope. If you've been here and you've worked on these tours and you've helped sign these artists and you've figured out these routings and you've done them over and over and over again and they're stellar, I might consider that as being ready for the next step. But if you've been here a year or 2 years or 3 years and that's all that you can cite, not ready.
And I think the idea is that anyone can do this. You don't have to work at one of the companies that we work within to do this. Something that we did is we gave every single person at the company a goals tracker and sat with them and individualized their goals for how they'll know when they're ready for a promotion so they can just own it. And we encourage and ask them to keep a diary of each of their goals every week and then talk about it with their manager at their weekly check-in. So it's never a surprise if you're getting promoted or not anymore, because you should be having that conversation every week and you're owning your own career elevation. But that's something that like literally anyone in this audience can do. You can go make a goals tracker, keep your weekly diary, and you can ask your manager to go over it with them as well and say like, hey, here's the things that I've identified to get me to the next level. Are we aligned? I'm gonna start owning this myself and reporting back to you on it.
Something that Molly said on the previous conversation that I think really carries over here is Liz's smile file. I am a huge advocate of creating a positive evidence spreadsheet because it's like we never take into account.
What is that?
Basically, a positive evidence spreadsheet
it.
is where you collect all of the positive things that are happening, and it can be the smallest thing, like had an epic commute and like my life is amazing because of it, because we know the stories we tell ourselves, and especially as women, there's that moment where it's like someone steps on your toe on the subway and it was personal, right? Like you realize that like it was personal, you're now gonna spill your coffee, the rest of your day is gonna be terrible, you're in a bad mood, everyone's looking at you weird, and nobody thinks you should be doing this job. Right? Like there's that terrible spiral down. And so I would say like, I think it's really important in that moment, whether it's a note in your notes file, an Evernote, an email, or anything like that, that you kind of have this list of things that remind you of the number of things that have gone well, that are going well. And it really can be those small things like perfect commute door to door, shortest ever. Things like that are really important to cherish because
Awesome panel.
we take them for granted. Yes, awesome panel.
I love how it escalated from you stepped on my toe to I'm not meant to do this job. Like that is definitely me in a day. It's like
you
the
think
high,
you're
high,
fired.
yeah, high, low, low, all in the same hour. And then I'm gonna do it again and again. It's like, where do I find that energy? Okay, so I wanna talk about the word no, because I know this is a challenge for me, is how do I say no? Or maybe, when you become the leader, you have to say no to an employee about something. And I don't know if this is just like a female thing that it's hard to say no. I think it's hard for most people to say no, especially when we live in the world of FOMO and say yes to all the things. So I would love to hear, Lisa, from your point of view, like, how do you tell people to, no, go away? Just kidding.
Right, so I'm really good at saying no. Doesn't mean I like it better. So because I'm really clear on what's most important, right? So if I look even on a daily basis, there's only 3 things a human can do really, really well, exceptional, and everything else you have to let go. So if you start out by saying, these are the goals, this is where I'm going, then it's really clear what you do and what you don't do. The other thing goes back to keeping track of your accomplishments, because I think what happens is as women and men, women in particular, we get a disproportionate amount of housekeeping projects, like those off-balance sheet things that you do in the workplace you get no credit for, where there are people who are on task, working on priorities and moving forward, and then you're sitting around wondering why you're not progressing. And so one way, and the reason why we have the keep track of your accomplishments is because when you go to your manager and you say, gosh, I could take on that project, but that means I'm not going to do what you said is important to the business. How would you like me to proceed? And by the way, the answer to that will tell you how you're viewed. So it's really, really important that you do that syncing on priorities and that you stay on task. And then the way I schedule my life, because I'm a mom of 2 amazing teenage boys and a wife, I schedule myself first versus waiting for the leftovers. I schedule my kids in first, because if I'm on the soccer field and they look over and I'm on my phone, then I'm definitely gonna get the loser mom award. And then Landit will suck up everything else, right? So you have to prioritize hyper-prioritization, and then that's how I stay on task. And it's very easy for me to say no, in a nice way, of course, but I do it really, really well.
Could you write a post with some of those templates of how to say no? But I love what Lisa says about the prioritization, because going back to what I said before about your boss having no idea what you're doing, you have to remind them of and frame it so that it's their decision and not your decision. So you're saying, okay, in order to get that report done by Friday, we're gonna need to make a change to report 1, report 2, and report 3. Would you like report 3 to come in next Wednesday instead? And you make them make the decision, because ultimately it's their trade-off, right? And they're the ones who are going to say, oh, you know what, actually, the thing I just assigned you, that can be due next Wednesday, right? Like, once they're faced with the challenge of having to prioritize their own assignments for you, they will realize that you have more going on than they initially thought, and it means you don't even have to say no at all. You instead position it as a time management challenge.
You could also say no as in, I'm not going to take it on, but maybe I can take a smaller part, because sometimes you have to be a team player. Or it could be, I can't do it, but here's someone else who can. But you got to develop that muscle to say no, otherwise you're going to get run over. It sounds kind of dramatic, but it's true. Right? You're going to have to develop it.
I think it's interesting though. I think like careers, there's this arc of like saying yes and then saying no, because when I reflect on when I was in college, I worked like 4 jobs, and I remember one of those jobs, my boss was like, hey, Mallory, we have this really unique opportunity. We want to fly you to Seattle and have you manage a project. And I was 19 years old at the time. And I was like, wow, like I have this opportunity to go to Seattle. And I look at my calendar, and it was the same week as a concert I really wanted to go to. And meanwhile, I also had 3 other jobs. And I was like, oh, I really need to like set boundaries and prioritize. Like, I'm gonna tell her that I wanna think about it. I really don't wanna go. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And she could tell like I wasn't that into it. And I was like, can you give me a week to think about it? And she was like, no, I've got to tell the client, like who's managing the project. And it was Apple was the client. And she's like, I have to tell the client who's managing the project. And I was like, okay. And then her husband, who was my other boss, called me and was like, this is an opportunity for you for your career. You will be able to say for the rest of your life that when you were 19 years old, you got asked by your boss to do this. You're crazy. And he was totally right. So I did it. I said yes. And in hindsight, I realized, like, I will never have the energy that I had. I'm 30 now, that I had when I was 19. I should have said yes to every single thing that came my way, and I really did try. So it's like, yes, 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 yes. Create more and more and more and more opportunities for yourself, or at least for me. As much as I could, got to where I was, and now, you know, it's like picking the right opportunities and saying like, how is this helping my employees? How is this helping my business? And being mindful of things that way. Whereas in order to be able to say no, I had to say yes to thousands of things, and like did a lot of things for free for people, even though I know my value. And that's a conversation we all have as women too, is like, know your value, get paid, but it's also like, put good karma out into the universe. Say yes to a lot of things. Do favors for people when you're earlier in your career and you have the time and the energy and the ability to do it and less risk.
What was the concert you wanted to go to?
I don't even remember, which...
Although I would say you want to continue to take risk. I'm with you on saying yes to more things. No, you say yes to opportunities, not to off-balance sheet stuff per se, but we think that after we get to a certain level, we don't have to take risk. And the way we look at it is, if you are cruising in the green zone, nothing good's going to happen. No compensation, no sponsorship, no promotion. You don't want to be in the outer ring, which is the cray-cray zone, where you're so paralyzed you can't move. So you have to live in this constant state of being uncomfortable, right? Being willing to disrupt yourself, because that's the only way you move forward. And we become more reluctant to do it as we become more senior. But that's actually when you have the biggest to gain.
Absolutely. All right, last question that I would love for all of you to answer, which is, what do you want to see companies do more of to advance women in the workplace and specifically female leadership?
I think we need to listen to our women. I learn the most from the youngest of women that work at the company. I mean, provided they've been there for a little while, you know, that they've learned their way around the place. But I think if we don't listen to the people that are coming after us and that are following us, and we're just minding our own minds and minding our own ways, I don't think we evolve, and I don't think we grow. Some of the greatest suggestions that we're doing internally come from our assistants or our trainee classes.
So the whole reason I started Landit is because looking at the millions of us who are just trying to achieve success, but not knowing where to start, not knowing we don't know, and not having the access. And so what we do, and what I want companies to do, is do that one-size-fits-one investment, because we see that when you empower and give people not only the know-how about the access, 1 + 1 = 10. And we see how we unlock human potential. That's the mission that I'm on. So we have to stop thinking about investing at the company level and start thinking about meeting people where they are and unlocking talent one by one at scale.
Building on what Natalia said, I think alongside listening is being willing to have hard conversations. I think oftentimes we've now gotten really skittish in the workplace where everything feels sort of off limits, or, I mean, honestly, it's hard to bring up a lot of topics just because we never get the chance to practice discussing them. That's how infrequently we talk about them, right? Like oftentimes asking for a raise or something, it might be something you do once a year. You don't get that much practice. And I think that in terms of women in the workplace, the most important thing we can do is really push those conversations forward and encourage other women to have them. I'm very big on horizontal loyalty and the idea that your peers are some of your best mentors that you'll ever have. And so I would say, look to the women on your right and on your left and really think through how you as a band of management or a group of individual contributors can make change within the company.
Mine actually piggybacks really nicely off of that one, because I was thinking about your question, like, what do we wish companies were doing? But thinking about everyone here, like, what can we do as individuals? I think every time there's an opportunity, whether it's to hire someone, to suggest someone for a panel, to think about a brand partner for the company you work at, thinking about women for those opportunities. Obviously, this is a panel about women leadership or female leadership, but I sit on a lot of panels that are gender neutral, if you will. And so just being able to, if you have a voice or you're sitting in a room thinking about a woman-run business to bring in or a female-led brand to partner with, because those are small actions we can all take and raise our hands and that make a difference.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way to end this panel. You guys knocked it out of the park. Your leadership advice. We'll just take the manual from all of you next, the PDF, so we can take it with us. But thank you, everyone, for joining the SheMarket event and coming to this panel. I hope you have lots of good leadership tips that you've taken from them. And thank you so much again.